Natalia, Cezanne died in 1906. And what's new about Cezanne? Why to do an exhibition now? Despite the fact that the pleasure is immense.
You are absolutely right. What I think is that there is a Cezanne for every generation. There was the Cezanne for his friends and his family. There was a Cezanne for the first generation of the classical modernists, for Picasso, for Matisse, for Monet. There was a Cezanne for the age just before the war, and for every generation after that. In fact, the last big Cezanne show, which came to the UK, an extensive survey of his life and work, happened 25 years ago at Tate Gallery at the time. It was before Tate Modern opened, and it was part of the big 95-96 touring show, which took more than 250 works by Cezanne across Europe and the America.
But we are speaking to an international audience. So what are the recent discovery, or how do we look at Cezanne today?
So yeah, I'm leading to that. So that exhibition draw the line under Cezanne effect. They looked at Cezanne in terms of his influence on the 20th century modernist movements and looked at his art from this particular point of view. In the last 25 years since this big survey show, a lot happened. There's a big body of research and publications which were released in the last 25 years. There's now an online catalog raisonné, which covers all the works by Cezanne, all known works by Cezanne, all his paintings, all his watercolors, all his works on paper and drawings. You can read about Cezanne's life. You can look at the list of his exhibition. You can sort the works in terms of which works participated in what exhibitions or which works were in whose collection, which was an incredible resource to have during the lockdown, I should admit. So anyone can have access 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to the entire anthology of Cezanne's life, biography, historiography, and his works. The recent research also unmasked a lot of assumptions and a lot of myths about the artist as well. As you know, the last letter between Cezanne and his friend Émile Zola, which contradicts the assumption that after the publication of the masterpiece, L'Œuvre, by Émile Zola, the communication between two friends ceased, was uncovered only in 2014 and published, and revealed to us that friendship, maybe not on the same level, but still continued.
Okay.
There's also a new translation of Cezanne's letters, which was published by Alex Danchev in English for the first time since the first translation done by John Revolt, and that also corrected a lot of translation errors and misconceptions, and gave us another another look at Cezanne from the point of view of the primary sources. There are also research by a specialist like Andrzej Dąbrowski, which looks at Cezanne and his engagement with the history, with the popular imagery, with the culture of the late 19th century. There is incredible research which is done by the academics and museum professionals in France. Denis Coutain, the president of the Société Cezanne.
What's his name again?
Denis Coutain. I'll send
Denis
you.
Coutin?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll send you all the names after the interview. He is working very hard on creating a new research center dedicated to Cezanne in his hometown, Aix-en-Provence, in the former residence of the Cezanne family on the outskirts of Aix-en-Provence in Jas-les-Bouffons. Which should open in a couple of years and allow extensive library and research facilities, as well as the fellowships and residence to Cezanne scholars.
But now it's a suburban, ugly neighborhood, huh?
It is now suburban ugly neighborhood, but the grounds of the house, not the farm, unfortunately, but the grounds of the house been preserved, and the house is getting restored. There is even a lift for disabled access installed as we speak now. And there's incredible access to Cezanne's private life, also the recent scholarship, also the advancement in access to his works for the international audience means there is a time for the new look at the great master who's.
And so it means for the exhibition, what was the aim of the exhibition?
So the exhibition was exactly that, to have another look at Cezanne and establish a Cezanne for the 21st century audiences that haven't seen a big survey by the master since for the last 25 years.
But we were lucky enough in France to have the exhibition at Orsay dedicated to the portraits.
Exactly. So the portraits and that exhibition came to National Portrait Gallery in London after d'Orsay. But that's just one genre in Cezanne's work. Our exhibition covers all periods of his work, all genres of his works, and all media. So we show his early works, we show his works from his famous still life from the 1880s. We show his famous bathers from the early works till the large bathers, which were still in his studio when he died in 1906. We show his drawings, his sketchbooks, a print. We also show his palette and watercolor boxes, looking at the usage of the new available materials by the artists of the so-called Impressionist Revolution of the 1870s. And we, of course, have the late works which were created when he remained in Aix-en-Provence since around 1899, seizing his seasonal migration to.
But so what can be the apprehension of the general public of 21st century? What can be is the new apprehension of Cezanne today?
So going through the galleries and listening to what people talk about when they visit the exhibition gives an incredible insight into the public's perception of Cezanne now. And what the public interested in is in Cezanne the man. They're less interested in how much he influenced Picasso and how much his bather compositions were a linchpin or launchpad for his Demoiselles d'Avignon. They're more interested in how Cezanne grappled with modernity. They're more interested of what happened in his private relationship with his parents or with his lifelong partner, Hortense Fiquet.
But why, she was married to him. Why don't you call her Madame Cezanne?
Because she became Madame Cezanne in 1886. But they were together for almost 20 years before that. When she was Hortense Fiquet, so her life was mostly that of Hortense Fiquet. not of Madame Cezanne, only on the last sort of 20-25 years of her life she was Madame Cezanne.
Because in all exhibitions she's presented like Madame Cezanne, huh?
Exactly, she is. And there was a great exhibition at the Met, which was called Madame Cezanne, which examined exactly this very special relationship between Cezanne and his favorite model and his lifelong partner. But for most of his life, she was Hortense Viquier.
But he doesn't show any love with his wife. He treats his wife like the apple.
So what we can surmise from this incredible body of works featuring Hortense Viquier and later Madame Cezanne is that she was his favorite model. And that we know Cezanne hasn't painted commissioned portrait. He only painted portrait of people he knew very closely and very intimately, because he was at his best when he had a very special relationship, very personal relationship with his sitter, just like with his landscape. He would paint the same subject over and over again because he needed to know and engage very personally with his motif.
But also because probably the motif itself was not the subject. Well, it was going further than that.
That's one of the avenues we can explore, but at the same time we cannot ignore that she was his model for most of his life. His last portrait of her is from the 1890s, and he only ceased painting her when she started spending more and more time in Paris because of her health. And we cannot ignore that through this engagement between him and his partner, between him and his favorite model, indicates that there was more than just easily accessible person he could put in a chair and paint day after day. I think this is what people are interested in. They absolutely love the page from Cezanne's sketchbook, which shows Cezanne's landscape and then his son's attempt to replicate this landscape in his child's hand on the next page. So this kind of father-son relationship, which could be seen through a very private and very personal object like artist's sketchbook.
But in fact, Cezanne is a very complex artist, huh?
Absolutely.
Extremely. So probably people try to catch Cezanne through his personal life because he's so complex, because he doesn't make things beautiful. Sometimes, of course, the shadows, the southern landscape, etc. But even his wife is not a beautiful woman, so he's not trying to make something beautiful, but striking, right? But for me, the most interesting aspect was one of the aspects of the exhibition, one of the main aspects of the exhibition was the impact of Cezanne on the artist. Could you speak about that?
So can I just go back and finish with what people like to see in the exhibition? Because that's important. It's important that the exhibition speaks to the public's mood today. And this is why it's been incredibly successful. And we have such great reviews because it's captured the mood of the people here and now. And one of the rooms is actually dedicated to his work in Lestat. London audiences know nothing about Lestat, but what they understand in this room is about him finding a place and a motif to work by himself in isolation, away from his family, away from his friends. He sees his correspondence. His friends can't find him when he's in Lestat. But this work in isolation, in the engagement, very deep engagement with the land, is what speaks to the British audience now, because we just came out of 2 years of lockdown and people understand this need of a deeper engagement with something local. And the fact that he was the only modernist who, instead of going for an exotic shores of Pacific Island like Gauguin did, or constructing his own artificial idyll in the garden like Monet did. He went home.
Yeah, but home was south of France with a very special light, and we have to say that L'Estaque is a suburban small city near Marseille, which was beginning to be industrial, right? So it was industrial, so modernity, and the very special light of the sea and of south of France. That's probably why you went there.
Well, but at the same time, that was the place where it wasn't only industrial center, it was also a holiday. It was a resort at the time. You know, beautiful Belle Epoque villas on the seafront,
which still exist.
Exactly. So he and his mother would escape when he was a child or teenager, would escape overbearing attention of the father and go to L'Estaque to seek exactly this isolation. So apart the light he could have anywhere, the rocks he could have anywhere, but L'Estaque for him was the place of isolation, and the art historians say that Cezanne became Cezanne in L'Estaque.
No, that's interesting. And it's not by mistake that Braque went there, for example, like in Pilgrimage.
And the very right word, exactly, pilgrimage. So he and Picasso and other modernists went to L'Estaque, retracing steps of Cezanne, looking for the same motivation, for the same inspiration like Cezanne.
But can we speak about the fact that some artists needed to possess some Cezanne in their collection? Could you speak about that? I'm fascinated by that.
Absolutely. So one of the main strings which run through the entire exhibition is the fact that Cezanne was very much the artist. And a lot of the labels have a note about the works which were formerly in the collection of artists like Pissarro, Monet, Gauguin, Lucien Freud, Picasso, Matisse, Henry Moore. We have loans from the collection of Jasper Jones. So
two.
Yeah,
right? You have two.
Yes, we have two. We have two works from the collection of Jasper Jones. So the need to possess for the artist of his generation, it was Cezanne the mystery, it was Cezanne the puzzle, because Cezanne wasn't in the 70s and 80s. He wasn't in the museums. He wasn't in the collection. He also didn't particularly need to sell his works. He had the allowance from his father. So in order to see Cezanne and engage with him and look at him, one needed to have a Cezanne. So this is why artists like Paul Gauguin would say he would rather sell the last shirt of his back than his favorite still life by Cezanne. And we have that still life with the fruit dish, Naturellement à la compotier, from the MoMA collection in our galleries.
Wow.
More than that, that particular work was hailed as the first one where Cezanne's manner of working, his constructive brushstrokes, became his definite style. And that was established by a British art historian, Roger Fry, in the 20s, in the 1920s, after he went to Paris and spent days looking at the Pèlerin collection. And in our archive at Tate Modern, we actually have his sketchbook with little drawings and the notes from that very visit, which then became the basis of his seminal publication of 1927, Paul Cezanne, which established Cezanne's reputation as the father of the modern art for the English-speaking audience for a couple of generations. But this work has never been seen in England, has never been seen in the UK. The most famous Cezanne, the work where Cezanne became Cezanne, is shown in London for the very first time. And it's reunited with the sketchbook and the notes, which established this particular work as a very important in Cezanne's oeuvre.
And what about the Picassos?
Yes, absolutely. We have two loans from the Picasso Museum. And one of them is a landscape of L'Estaque. And we know that as soon as Picasso became wealthy enough, became successful enough, he started buying Cezanne. He wanted to have them in his collection in order to learn from Cezanne, in order to look. And the slow looking, which his contemporaries and the modernist, classical modernist like Picasso, needed to appreciate Cezanne, is very much something we try to encourage in our exhibition. So
the second one?
Beg your pardon?
The second one, the second work coming from Picasso Museum?
The second work coming from his museum is, of course, the Bathers.
The what?
The Bathers.
Ah.
5 Bathers. So we know that Cezanne's Bathers were absolutely key for Picasso's work. And we know that Cezanne, that Picasso had access to Cezanne's work because they shared the art dealer. Ambroise Vollard was Cezanne's art dealer, and he also started representing Picasso as early as 1900s. So Cezanne would have access to, Picasso would have access to Cezanne's stock in Vollard's
for sure. What about Monet?
So we also know that Monet had a beautiful work by Cezanne, but a particular one we wanted to put in focus is the portrait of Scipio, the model from Académie Suisse, which Cezanne attended. And that's the place where he actually met Pissarro, and through Pissarro, he met other modernists, including Monet, Guillaumin, and others. So the portrait of Scipio was an early work. The date of the work is 1866. And Monet called it le premier coup de force. So a lot of exhibitions about Cezanne, which happened before the Second World War, were actually titled Cezanne Portraits from Scipio to Vollard, or Cezanne's work from Scipio to the Grand Bathers. So the portrait of Scipio was considered one of the key works by Cezanne, but yet because it's ended up after the war in Brazil and in museum at Sao Paulo, it sort of escaped art historical attention and only recently came back to focus in Europe for exhibitions like Le Modèle Noir at d'Orsay.
But before being in Brazil, who did it belong to?
So it belonged to the Sao Paulo Art Museum.
Yeah, but before that, where was it?
So it was in the collection of Monet and then his son.
Okay.
Yeah. So the last owner of the work was Michel Monet, who was Monet's son and inherited his collection.
What about Lucien Freud?
Lucien Freud, yes, of course. It's a beautiful Baroque scene, Afternoon in Naples, which is now in the private collection, but that was left as a bequest to Lucien Freud's assistant after his death. So yes, Lucien Freud acquired the work, which featured a couple in bed with an attendant, maybe a brothel scene. Very Lucien Freud, but yes, two nudes in a beautiful boudoir, highlighting sort of the decadent Parisian society of the 1860s as Cezanne found it when he went to Paris for the first time.
But the titles speak about Naples.
No, as you know, Cezanne didn't particularly exhibit a lot during his lifetime. And if you don't exhibit, you don't put titles on the wall. So most of the works were titled posthumously, either by Vollard or by museums or by people who exhibited his works. So just like the work we exhibit next to the Afternoon in Naples is the work entitled Leather ? And Nude. We now know that in fact it wasn't a letter or a nude or anything to do with ancient mythology. It was Cezanne copying a champagne label from the champagne called Nana. So one champagne producer tried to cash in on the success of Émile Zola's Nana publication and release a champagne called Nana, and probably Cezanne and Zola had a bottle of that between them, and Cezanne copied the label in his sketchbook. We have the sketchbook in the exhibition, and we show
what can be the explanation about Naples? I thought it was a Southern Light or something like that.
Well, I can't guess why titles were given to the works. They were not titles by Cezanne.
Okay.
So people saw a sort of Baroque boudoir scene and just gave it a catchy title because it didn't have one. Just like they called the nude on the couch leather for some reason.
Okay, it's more commercial if you put leather.
Exactly.
Some mythology make it better.
Absolutely, but the research by Denis Coutin found the design for the champagne label in the archive in France, because the label had a patent. The design was patented, and the patent is still in the Archives Nationales de France. So we can trace the source from that label to the actual work.
And did you have some artists coming to visit the show who make some remarks?
Yes, of course we do have artists. We had Phillida Barlow, a British artist who uses canvas in a new and adventurous way in her installations, multimedia installations. She was saying that Cezanne was absolutely key for her as an art student in the 60s. We also have Julia Fish, an artist based in Chicago, whom we met at the very early stages of our research, and she remembers that she was taken by her art professors when she was an art student to the Art Institute of Chicago to look at Cezanne, to study his approach to perspective, his approach to composition, his approach to color, his incredible use of a very restricted number of colors, but in a very diverse palette of colors. We also have artists who contributed their thoughts and impressions. Very young generation of artists, like Paul Chang, an American artist who was really inspired by Cezanne's approach to the bather scene through the personal engagement of a human being with the water. So forget the classical monumental Nicolas Poussin style composition. Forget the adventurous usage of the color. The new generation of artists have a very different look at it and very different approach. So for Paul Chang, what was important is an early correspondence between Cezanne and Zola, and them reminiscing about the trips to the river and their bathing together and the peace and tranquility and this kind of a moment in perfect friendship they had together. That is what important for Paul Chang. And actually, he created his own projects, multimedia installations, dedicated to the theme of the bather, taking it from this particular personal.
Oh, that's interesting. And you have interviewed Kerry Jess Marshall about Cezanne. It's in the interview is in the catalog. Please send a message to him that I'm dreaming of interviewing him. I want to interview Kerry James Marshall. I can even go there. I think he's in Chicago, right?
He is.
Yeah. Tell him I do want to interview him.
I will do. Absolutely, will pass the message on.
Ok, merci beaucoup.
Oh, merci à vous. C'était un plaisir.
Merci.
Merci, au revoir.
Bye.
Bonne journée.